Hello, my name is Tayson from casaGeo, the data science and location intelligence company. With the third part on use the power of postgreSQL in Alteryx. In the last video, we implemented the PostGIS feature in Alteryx in two different ways. In this video we will create macros from the workflows. In the end we will have a macro for each method. To build the macros we need the following tools: action, control parameter, macro input, macro output, radio button, detour end, and then to test the macros we will need the browse, select records, unique and text input tool. Let's start with method 1. We open the workflow method 1 nodes. First, we convert the browse tool into a macro output tool. Next, we open the pre-SQL statement window in the input tool and overwrite the numeric parameters. We enter 1111 as the ID, 9.00 as the longitude, 53.00 as the latitude and 22 as the time. Except for the 0, no digit appears in two different parameters. This way I make sure that a parameter is not accidentally overwritten with the wrong value. By clicking on OK we save the changes. Now we need the first control parameter for the ID. We call it IDN and connect it to the input tool. In the action tool, we select the field pre-SQL value under format specific options. Activate replace a specific string and write into the field 1111. This will overwrite .id in the pre-SQL script with the current ID. We now have to do the same 3 more times. For the longitude, the latitude and for time. We do not want to overwrite the other parameters. So they always remain the same, except for the table into which we write the nodes. Accordingly, we do the same again for the table. But here we need a second action tool. In the action tool we click on File, Value and replace Video ISO lines. The possibility to write the results in different tables is important. If you want to use the macro several times in a workflow, it is advisable to use a different table name each time. So, the first macro is complete. I save it under macro method 1 nodes. I will test it in a new workflow right now. Using the text input tool and select records, I select a record and connect it to the macro. I run the workflow for the first record and look at the result in the browse tool. Then I test it again for the second and for the third record. Next I build the macro for the catchment area. In principle, I have to do exactly the same as for the first macro. The difference is that we now always connect the action tools with File, Value. I have added a pre-SQL statement to the workflow in which I delete the video ISO lines table. I save the macro under macro method 1 catchment area. I copy it into my test workflow for testing and connect the macro with the select record tool and run the workflow and now get both the catchment area and the nodes. But for this, the function has to be executed twice on the database. Since I only want to execute the function once, I build a third macro with the 2 macros, which I will then use in my workflows. To do this, I delete the select record tool and convert the text input tool into a macro input tool and a browse tool into a macro output tool. Now I need the detour tool, which I place in front of the macros and connect to them, and the detour end tool, which I place behind the macros and connect to them. The detour tool causes only one strand to be executed. Normally the left one or, if I activate it, the right one. Now I need 2 radio buttons. I call one catchment area and set it as the default value in the other nodes. This way we can decide later whether we want the nodes or the catchment area. In order for the whole thing to work, we have to do 2 more things. We connect the radio button catchment area with the detour tool and click on the action tool. It has automatically selected the right option, so we don't have to do anything else. Now I open the interface designer, add a group box into which I move the two radio buttons. I also add a new tab into which I move the input fields. I think this looks neater. I also add the postgreSQL logo to the macro. I close the interface designer and save the macro under macro method 1. Now I need a new workflow to test the macro. I have my text input tool and select record tool again and test the new macro with the two options. Wonderful, it works. Method 2. Now I build the second macro. This is much easier. I change the input tool into a macro input tool and the two browse tools into macro output tools. I call the upper one catchment area and the lower one nodes. Now we just have to add the possibility to change the table name. For this we need a control parameter, which we call table. We connect it to the output tool and select postgreSQL value. I activate replace a specific string and write video ISO lines into the field. Then I connect the control parameter to the connect in database tool and select query value. Now I only have to change the icon and can save the macro under macro method 2. All that is missing is the final test. To do this, I load the macro in the test workflow, and since I only want to create each table once, I need a unique tool. We run the workflow again, test it for the different locations and get both the catchment area and the nodes with the second macro in one step. This brings us to the end of our little series. You have seen how you can add postgreSQL functions to Alteryx. If you liked the video, please give us a like, and if you are interested in the topics data science and location intelligence, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you for your time.